A mechanic fixed a woman's car for free when she couldn't pay. Days later, a rich visitor arrived. It was a cold afternoon when Jake, a humble mechanic, was finishing up his last job of the day at his small garage on the outskirts of town, wiped his hands on an old rag, exhausted but satisfied. He had spent years fixing cars, never asking for more than what was fair. His garage wasn't fancy, just a simple workshop with a few tools and a heart full of honesty. But today, something unexpected was about to happen, something that would change his life forever. Just as he was about to lock up, a woman rushed in, her face pale with worry. She was in her mid-30s, her clothes worn but clean, and her eyes filled with desperation. Her car had broken down a few miles away, and she had no one else to turn to. "Please," she said, catching her breath. "I don't have much, but I just need my car to run again. I have to get home to my son." Jake could see the distress in her eyes. He had seen many people struggle over the years, and he never turned away someone in real need. Without asking any further questions, he grabbed his tools and followed her to the broken-down vehicle. The old sedan was barely holding together, but Jake had a knack for making things work. As he got to work under the hood, the woman stood by anxiously, her fingers gripping her coat tightly. She kept glancing at him, as if trying to find the right words to say. After nearly an hour, Jake finally stepped back and wiped his forehead. "There you go," he said with a small smile. "It should run fine now." The woman sighed in relief. "Thank you so much. How much do I owe you?" Jake hesitated. He had seen enough in life to recognize when someone was struggling. The woman had barely made eye contact when she spoke about payment, and the way she clutched her purse made it clear. She didn't have the money. "It's on the house," he said simply, packing up his tools. Her eyes widened. "No, I can't let you do that." Jake shrugged. "Sometimes people just need a little kindness." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "I promise I'll find a way to repay you." Jake just nodded and watched as she drove off into the evening, her car now running smoothly. To him, it was just another day of doing the right thing. But what he didn't know was that his simple act of kindness was about to set something extraordinary into motion. A few days later, Jake was working on an old pickup truck when a sleek black car pulled up in front of his garage, the kind of car that didn't usually find its way to his small town shop. The door opened, and out stepped a sharply dressed man with an air of importance. He glanced around before his eyes landed on Jake. "Are you Jake?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Jake wiped his hands and nodded. "Yeah, that's me. What can I do for you?" The man studied him for a moment before smiling slightly. "I think you already did something. Now it's time for someone to return the favor." Jake frowned, unsure of what was happening. Who was this man? And what favor was he talking about? Little did he know, the answer to those questions would change his life in ways he never imagined. Jake studied the man standing in front of him. His suit was crisp, his shoes polished, and there was something about him that felt out of place in this small town. The way he carried himself, with confidence and authority, made it clear he wasn't just another customer looking for a quick fix on a broken-down car. "Sorry, but I don't think I follow," Jake said, his brows furrowed. The man gave a knowing smile. "A few days ago, you helped a woman. She didn't have the money to pay, but you fixed her car anyway." Jake nodded slowly. He remembered. He had thought about the woman a couple of times since then, hoping she had made it home safely. "She's my sister," the man continued. Jake's eyes widened slightly. This was not what he expected. She told me everything. The man said, about how you didn't hesitate to help her, even when she had nothing to offer in return. He took a step closer. Most people wouldn't have done that. Jake shrugged. It was just the right thing to do. The man studied him for a long moment, then let out a small chuckle. You're exactly how she described you. Honest, hard-working, a good man. Jake shifted on his feet, unsure of where this conversation was headed. He wasn't used to compliments, and he definitely wasn't used to well-dressed strangers showing up at his garage. My name is Daniel, the man finally said, extending a hand. Jake shook it firmly, still wary. Look, Daniel, I'm glad your sister's okay, but I don't need anything in return, Jake said, hoping to clear up whatever misunderstanding was happening here. Daniel smirked. That's exactly why I'm here. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Jake. Jake glanced down. It had an embossed logo, sharp lettering. Daniel's full name and title were printed neatly. CEO. You own a company? Jake asked, raising a brow. Daniel nodded. More than one, actually. Real estate, tech investments, a few other things. Jake let out a low whistle. He knew Daniel was well off just by looking at him, but this was a whole different level. Daniel leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Here's the thing, Jake. I don't believe in coincidences. My sister was stranded, desperate, and you helped her when no one else would. That means something. Jake shrugged. Just seems like basic human decency. Daniel tilted his head. Maybe. But the world doesn't run on decency. It runs on people making choices. You made a choice to help, even when you didn't have to. Jake wasn't sure where this was going, but he could feel the weight behind Daniel's words. You've been running this garage for what? 10, 15 years? Daniel asked. Jake hesitated. 14. Daniel nodded, as if he already knew the answer. And let me guess. It hasn't been easy. Probably struggling to keep things running, especially with all these big auto shops moving in. Jake clenched his jaw. He didn't like to admit it, but Daniel wasn't wrong. Business had been tough lately. The town was changing, and more people were going to larger corporate repair centers instead of small, independent garages like his. Daniel tapped a finger against the counter. I looked into you, Jake. You're known for being fair, for helping people, but you're also barely making enough to keep this place going. Jake felt a flicker of irritation. I get by. I'm sure you do, Daniel said. But what if you didn't have to just get by anymore? Jake narrowed his eyes. What are you getting at? Daniel straightened up, his expression turning serious. I want to make you an offer. Jake folded his arms. I'm not looking to sell my garage, if that's where this is going. Daniel chuckled. Not quite. I want to invest in you. Jake blinked, caught off guard. Invest? I want to help you expand this place. New equipment, more mechanics, better resources. You shouldn't have to scrape by when you're one of the good ones. Jake exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure if this was some kind of trick, or if Daniel was genuinely offering him a lifeline. Why? Jake finally asked. Daniel's expression softened. Because men like you are rare, and because I owe you for helping my sister when she had no one else. Jake hesitated. He had spent years building this garage with his own hands, working hard for every dollar. The idea of accepting help, of suddenly having money to improve his business, felt strange. Think about it, Daniel said, sensing his hesitation. No pressure, just consider what this could mean for you. With that, Daniel turned and walked back to his car, leaving Jake standing there, his mind racing. He had spent so long fighting to survive, to keep his small business afloat. Now, out of nowhere, an opportunity had landed in his lap. A chance to change everything, But deep down, something still nagged at him. Was this really just an act of gratitude? Or was there more to Daniel's offer than he was letting on? And if Jake accepted, what would it cost him? Jake stood there long after Daniel's car had disappeared down the road, his mind spinning. It wasn't every day that a wealthy businessman showed up at his garage offering help, and while the idea of finally getting a break sounded tempting, something about it didn't sit right. That night, he barely slept. He kept thinking about what accepting Daniel's offer would mean. Would he lose control of his garage? Would it change the way he worked, the way he treated people? He had always been proud of running things on his own terms. But now he had to ask himself, was pride worth struggling forever? The next morning, just as he was about to call Daniel and ask for more details, a familiar car pulled up outside his shop. It was the woman he had helped days ago, Daniel's sister. She stepped out, looking nervous but determined. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said, wringing her hands. "Not at all," Jake said. "Everything okay?" She nodded. I needed to talk to you before you make any decisions." Jake frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "My brother. He's a good man. But when he wants something, he doesn't take no for an answer. He sees potential in you, but I don't think he told you everything." Jake's stomach tightened. "Like what?" She glanced around, lowering her voice. "He doesn't just want to invest in your garage. He wants to expand, turn it into a franchise. He's been looking for someone like you, someone with skill and a good reputation. But if you say yes, you won't just be fixing cars anymore. You'll be running a business the way he wants you to." Jake exhaled sharply. He should have known there was more to the offer. "I didn't want you to feel pressured," she continued. "You helped me when I had nothing, and that meant more than you know. I just thought you should have all the facts." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He had been so focused on what he could gain, he hadn't thought about what he might lose. His garage wasn't just a business. It was his life. The people who came to him weren't just customers. They were neighbors, friends, people who trusted him because he was fair and honest. If he let someone else take control, even someone as powerful as Daniel, what would happen to that? When Daniel called later that afternoon, Jake was ready. "I appreciate the offer," Jake said. "Really, I do. But I have to say no." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Daniel sighed. "I figured you might." "No hard feelings?" Jake asked. Daniel chuckled. "Not at all. Honestly, I respect it. Most people would have jumped at the chance." Jake smiled. "I'm not most people." "No, you're not," Daniel agreed. "But if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." As the call ended, Jake felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. He had worked too hard to build this place, and no amount of money or success was worth giving that up. The next day, as he tightened the last bolt on an old truck, the woman returned once more. This time, she wasn't empty-handed. She handed him an envelope, her eyes shining with gratitude. "My brother isn't the only one who believes in paying kindness forward," she said. Jake opened it and found a check inside. Not an investment, not a business deal, just a gift, enough to upgrade his tools, maybe fix the leaky roof in the back. It wasn't millions, but it was more than enough to make a difference. Tears pricked the woman's eyes as she spoke. "Because of you, I made it home that night. I was able to pick up my son, and he wasn't left alone. That's something I can never repay." Jake swallowed the lump in his throat. "You didn't have to do this." She smiled. "Neither did you." As she drove away, Jake looked around his garage, the place he had poured his heart into. It might not be a big franchise, and it might not make him rich, but it was his, and that was more than enough. With a deep breath, he rolled up his sleeves and got back to work, knowing that sometimes The greatest rewards in life weren't measured in money, but in the lives we touch along the way.